Hello, everybody. Welcome to Feedback for the week of April 24th, 2012. Today, very serious topic, violence in video games. Starting things off today with a 10 words or less, we found the one person on the internet that's not complaining about this segment. Seth2681 says, I enjoy 10 words or less and I would like to contribute. Well, Seth, thank you for that. Nicole, if the video game industry had a public service announcement to warn about the dangers of violent video games, what should the mascot be? Think Scruff McGruff or Smokey the Bear. What would it be?
I propose Timmy the Teabag, Earl Grey. He has a monocle. Your move.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Never heard of that.
Is he an actual teabag
Yeah.
or is
No,
he
he's
just a
legitimate-
ball sack
no,
with a
he's
monocle taped to
legitimately
it?
Earl Grey tea.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Interesting.
Uh-huh.
Well thought out. Steve Johnson, now that she's taken your monocle answer, what are you going to do next?
Stabby the Knife.
Sounds familiar, but...
Stabby the Knife would advise children to, please, use me to cut bread,
Wow.
not kill friends.
Hold on one second. I'm writing down Steve the worst right there for the edit later. Donnell,
Holy
what about
crap.
you?
I was going to actually take this serious, but okay.
I'm
my
pretty
mascot.
sure Nicole took it seriously.
Timmy the Teabag?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
He's
I was
actual
thinking
teeth. He's
Smokey the
high in
Bear isn't,
antioxidants.
that's a, I mean, think about it. It's in the
I
vein
was
of
going
that.
to
Wearing
use,
jeans.
well, since it's about like video game violence, I was going to use like Mario, the most iconic
Lazy.
mascot out there,
Lazy.
right?
Okay.
And he could be like, "It's me, Mario." Okay, kids, I'm here to talk about, and go really.
Suddenly turns into the Donnell Zone voice. And then it becomes this weird thing.
Creepy.
Always
So
got to go back
right.
to
We've had a lot of fun today, but let's talk about something serious.
video game violence.
I do like where your head's at on that one. That's pretty good, Donnell. Mine's pretty easy. I think it would just be Kim Kardashian. Don't be this.
Well,
Right? I mean, you can find a way. I have a liberal arts degree, man, not a marketing degree. So just saying, that's my thing. Almost killed Steve Johnson.
Yes.
Today was almost a win. All right. On a serious note, we are talking about violence in video games, and I think the whole reason this conversation started is that recently, Nicole, you can relate this story. Is that this gentleman that killed a lot of people said he prepared by playing video games, which is something we've heard in the past, but obviously this is the most recent one. So why don't you run down the story quickly before we get into it?
So, currently, the trial for the mass murderer Anders Behring Breivik is taking place right now. And prior to the case and prior to the murders, he released a 1,500-page manifesto, and in it he detailed how Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 specifically helped him train for these events. And I mean, so much so that he bought the exact same scope that he used in Modern Warfare 2 for his rifle. Like so he definitely trained in this game, and he advocated other people doing the same thing. In the trial, it came out that he took a sabbatical for a year and spent 16 hours a day playing World of Warcraft. He says that there is no connection to it. He's obviously insane, so who really cares what he says?
Yeah, 1,500-page manifesto.
It's a Google Doc too.
It's crazy.
So, which is
that's-
well, I mean, at least he's using the cloud.
I wonder if he used Wave first, and then he was like, it's probably easier to use
Google
Google
Buzz,
Doc.
maybe?
Nobody wants to wave with me on this
No.
particular manifesto,
No.
so interesting.
Wow.
Anyway,
Yeah, Knights of
continue,
the
please.
Templars didn't help him out there.
Sorry to get off track.
So the situation here that there are some experts in the trial that are saying, oh, he can't separate reality from fantasy. We've heard this a million times. A lot of experts are chiming in saying this is complete crap. There's been a connection between violent games and actual violence has never been proven. And basically every media outlet ever is running with this story and saying and bringing up the issue again. Video games make people violent.
Okay, so first of all, he's on trial because he killed 77 people
In the first attack.
in the first attack. The interesting thing I think to point out here is that he wrote a 1,500-page manifesto, which means he's crazy.
Yeah.
There's no way around it. He's crazy. But the fact that he said he plays video games, I think, is why the media has glommed onto this. Really, video games have become the scapegoat, I would say this generation anyway, when it comes to things of this nature. Anybody that commits any sort of atrocity, if at any point they played Q*bert, suddenly video games,
That's
I think
why.
the media is blaming that. Do you think that's the case? And if so, why is it? And Steve, I want to hold off on you because I know you've got very conflicting feelings about this. So Nicole, do you think that is, why does the media do it? And is that really true?
First of all, I think it's not true. I think that there are more people playing games than ever, billions of people, and crimes down. So I mean, there's no connection there. And I mean, I play more games than anybody I know, yet to kill anybody. So I mean, I guess that disproves it, in my opinion. I think the reason that the media latches onto it is, one, it's easy. It's an easy story. I mean, I don't know. I'm a journalist, so it's an easy story to write. It's really simple to say. It's a lot of comments are generated, a lot of clicks are generated from it. It's a good headline. It's an easy story to write. From there, it's people want justification. People want to know how something horrible can happen, and so they can't just blame that he's just a bad person. They want to give a reason to it, and they want to blame something. In the 80s, they wanted to blame, metal music or rock music, and today they're going to blame video games because we want some kind of justification for the awful things some people can do.
Right, and I mean, on a top line, I think it's easy for people to understand. Like, he played a lot of Call of Duty, so he killed somebody, instead of digging below the hood and saying, why did he write a 1,500-page manifesto? Like, psychologically, we should look into this, but I think for the general audience, maybe it's easier to understand, right, if you blame that one thing, because blame does need to be placed. I think that's people, like you said, want to hear why this person did this.
It could also be a generational thing. I think a lot of people who are probably 40 and older probably don't know how to play games, don't know what games are, and it's probably just it's an easy thing to point their finger at.
Now, Donnell, you're really immersed in the fighting game scene, right?
Yeah.
Which, if by the media's logic, for the most part, the more violent games are, the more people are going to be violent. And yet you go to all these fighting game tournaments and you're involved in all these things. Now, do these people play fighting games and then go outside and fist fight each other?
Not at all.
So so that logic doesn't really.
It doesn't. It doesn't.
Donnell
go
beat
together.
me up right before we came.
Yeah, I did.
Steve deserved it.
Yeah,
That's another issue.
It's a personal thing that we don't want to get into here.
I don't see that at a fighting tournament, or especially as someone who plays fighting games. But I do. It does take effect when you're acting out doing a Hadouken or a Shoryuken, right? But we're not actually physically doing that to somebody, like in a fist fight.
But if you could shoot a ball,
an
blue
energy ball.
ball out of your hands
Would
at somebody's chest, would you do it?
If I got paid to do it, yeah.
Okay, all right.
I think so.
All right.
Only for the money.
Only money.
Right. But I mean, you're at
But-
these events where I would assume like I mean, I hate to use the word like testosterone in regards to video games, but where the testosterone is flowing pretty
Yes.
high, and estrogen in certain
Yeah.
cases is flowing pretty high.
They call it hype,
Okay.
as they say it
Okay.
there. And people do get very like emotional, and but there's no lash out of like between, I would say, like in real sports, that's like lashing out. Like when a football player like tackles somebody and they fight and they beat him up, or even hockey, it's literally the refs let him physically punch him in the face. And actually in boxing, there have been cases where people have been killed. A guy murdered somebody, and now they implemented if you see somebody getting their butt whooped, you better stop before you kill them. So it's definitely a big difference when it comes to fighting games, a game where I'm sitting down with a controller and having a virtual fight go on. Like, there's no, I'm going to actually punch this dude because he beat me, Of course there's frustration. Of course you don't want to lose.
Trash talking.
And there's trash talking.
Have
There
you
is.
never seen a fight in the fighting game community?
I've
Like,
never seen a fight in the fighting game, and I've been to Evo. I've been to Wednesday Night Fight. I've been around so many tournaments that I've never witnessed it, and I don't even hear about it being talked about.
I think you hear about it a lot if it did happen. Like that
Absolutely.
Seems
Well, I
like
think the
a lot of
media would
drama,
would
I think
glom
so
onto
too.
it immediately.
But I think like it's the only thing that people probably that you've done before is that slam the controller, or you get frustrated and you get mad, and so you walk off and you punch a wall. Maybe that's happened.
Maybe.
But it's never physical violence. Like, no one has ever really big, massive, like a team Mad Cats versus team Evil Geniuses, and they're all fighting against each other. Because you know what? We're not in the best shape. Some of us, we're not really in the best shape.
Well, that's an interesting point. I feel like with fighting games, I mean, I guess you can look at it like, I've never killed someone in real life, so I don't know if that would be a difficult thing or not. But I know it's got to be easier for somebody to play a Call of Duty, a first-person shooter, and think to themselves, I could also pick up a gun and kill somebody, as opposed to, like, if you're fighting somebody in Soul Calibur, the thought never crossed my mind. At some point, I could probably get a giant sword and spin around 13 times and cut this guy in half. Like, maybe there's a little bit of a disconnect there with.
But there is some kind of sort of effect because we like the characters. We are drawn into those characters, iconic characters, where we try to act out like them. So I definitely
Do you relate to Blanca? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, a little bit. I try to,
Is that racist? Is that racist? I don't know.
That's
Blanca's
not racist.
green,
Yeah.
He's
and
not
he grew up in the jungle,
orange.
and
You're going south.
I don't know, man. Yeah, maybe not the jungle part. You
Man,
were
not
good
the-
for a
you
while.
were fine
then-
with the green.
he was a little kid, and he fell out of an airplane, and he survived, and grew up in like the jungles of South America.
Oh my God!
Well,
you watched the
in the Street
cutscene.
Fighter movie, he was.
That's the video game.
Yeah,
canon.
but the movie Street Fighter, which is all fact, right?
Anything with Jean-Claude Van Damme in it is canon.
Yeah, that's
as far as
canon.
I'm
He
concerned.
fed images of war, hate, violence,
he's not Rambo.
and then became this evil monster. But then the
That really-
scientist, Dalsum, fed him happy stuff, like a child being born.
Which makes
is not
makes
happy.
a point about video games. Am I right?
Which makes
Yeah,
him very
which makes
kind
him
of
very
helpy.
How did they
himself,
explain the
so.
green?
A test of, I don't know, genetics.
Yeah, it's fine. It's whatever.
Don't worry about that.
Poor Phil.
Steve, what's your take on this?
All right, first off, I want to point out about this guy, and he was in Norway, right? This fella training with Modern Warfare is totally ridiculous because, I mean, his whole thing is just because he didn't go to a military base and try and do that. He went to some island filled with children where nobody was armed, and he knew it, so that guy. I mean, if you really wanted to train with Modern Warfare, go to a military base, pull out a gun, and see how long you last.
Right,
You know what I
yeah.
mean? If it's training, I this guy. I'm really. I don't like. Obviously, I don't like what he did, but I don't like then he pinning it on video games. It's ridiculous. The whole thing is dumb. But that having been said, like you said, I have mixed feelings about violence in video games, and it might be because I'm a dad. But I understand that the scientific studies are inconclusive about whether violence in video games can cause violence in real life. But I still, when I think about like a generation of kids between the ages of like 12 and 20 spending 8 hours a day doing nothing but enacting violent scenes constantly with headphones on, constantly, all day long, in like games like Call of Duty.
That's
I
not
think,
an average scenario.
but I'm just thinking that's got to have some effect.
Well,
I don't
you,
know what
you
kind
told
of
a, you,
effect-
told, you told an interesting story about your son Dexter, who we've already established because of your
boy.
terrible fathering is just destined to be a kid anyway.
Yeah, exactly. He's it's done for
It's
him.
already. It's probably
It's
less
over.
about games. But you did say, there's an interesting point that you brought up yesterday in the pre-meeting where you said you guys had played a certain game for X amount of hours, and then he was a lot more aggressive
Afterwards.
And
Immediately
what
afterwards.
game
Yeah,
was that?
He was playing Kinect Star Wars.
Uh-huh.
And that game isn't super violent, but it's super action-packed, and there's lots of lasers flying around and lots of stuff happening all at once. And that's not the kind of thing that he usually spends time either watching or playing. And immediately afterwards, when he played with his action figures, usually he has them do sort of peaceful things like go to school or go shopping or
Make
that kind of
friendship
thing.
bracelets.
Yeah, exactly. But this time it was all about shooting and throwing him around and fighting and all this stuff. And it was just kind of like, wow, I can't definitely say it was because he was playing that game, but it sure looks that way. I mean, it sure looks like that. Immediately afterwards, it made him kind of hyper and a little jacked and a little bit weird and a little, and it was just kind of like, okay.
But do you think if he was playing the Han Solo dance-off portion of the game, that he would immediately had his, his
Legos.
action figures reenact Step Up to the streets?
That's kind of a good point, and I don't know. Like,
That
Like, is it
test
just
was
his
not
immediate
conducted.
retention is
Yeah.
like, I must do this thing that I just saw? Or do you think the game actually, stirred something in him emotionally where he was like, I must destroy?
I think it's the first one, honestly. Like, I think it just, like, playing something like that gets your adrenaline flowing and gets you all jacked up and hyped up, where usually he plays, like, Lego games that don't do that. So he's got all this adrenaline, and he's like, let's go play action figures, and he gets it out with this sort of violent and really in-your-face kind of play that he doesn't usually, exhibit.
That's just not what you want to admit, but we know what your household
but
is like.
that having been said, though, like I know, like I was brought up on, I was a fan of horror movies when I was a kid, and the most violent possible films that I could possibly see were exactly what I was drawn to and exactly what I sought out, and I tried to get as much of that into my brain as I possibly could, either in movie theaters or on VHS. And I am an utterly non-violent person, and I'm not involved in anything that's violent, and I never have been. So I see why I have mixed feelings about it. I totally
Because of parenting. I'm going to say it right now. Parents, if you teach your kids to be good people, you're going to be okay, and they're going to be okay. This guy, I don't know what his background is like, but his parents probably sucked. And because of that, he felt the need to do what he did. But, I mean, think about it. This to me screams, I did not get enough attention in my life, outside of killing people, the fact that you have created this world for yourself where you have the time to write a 1,500-page manifesto on
While
anything
playing 16 hours a day.
of
Wow.
Warcraft. Like, somebody
That's a
needs to
lot
pay
of
more
wow.
attention to this dude. You know what I mean? Like, that's what I think. I think it's all the parents.
What we know for sure in research that's been like official approved is that poverty, right role models, and the society that the environment that they grow up does affect them. Does affect to being aggressive.
Violence in the family is a big one. And being a male. Just being a male already makes you...
Well, in males, when
You don't understand the feelings that we have.
I just don't, though.
when it
I
comes to
just-
male,
At
we
a
want to
certain
be
age, it
like
gets very
we
confusing.
want to be winners and we want to be the best. That's why like those toys. No, like those. Remember those Nerf
that?
commercials?
wanna
I'm pretty
take a nap.
content making it.
No, you want to be.
I just
you
want
wanna
to be part of something.
I'm happy
No,
to
You want to be the
survive
very
myself.
best.
But I don't want to
wanna
be part
win.
of killing a bunch of
Before.
kids on an island. I just want to be part of something rational and reasonable because I'm
you
not
wanna
crazy because my
win.
parents were good.
You want to be cool and you want to be the best because that's how commercials are
I
directed
just-
towards
I
us.
don't think that Steve
Yeah.
Johnson has ever felt that in his life.
Yeah, no, that's the
I don't
truth.
think Steve's ever wanted to win or be cool or be the best at anything.
Yes. When you were growing up,
I can't lie. It's,
when
it's really true. I don't.
You have no
know, I
desire
just-
to succeed?
I like doing my Steve Johnson thing, and I have my own,
Sorry,
my own vibes
sorry.
going on, and it doesn't,
nature,
It doesn't involve
nature says that you need to be.
I do think
the
that,
alpha male. You
I
need
do
to
think
be the
that
leader.
marketing does it speaks to our human at our base level, our competitive nature. But I don't think there's anything out there telling me that I need to be number one in
but
anything.
there is
my
because you're
parents.
surrounded by that every day.
Well, then my parents were just low achievers then because I never felt like I needed to be anything other than whatever it is I wanted to
My
be
mom's
at that
happy
moment.
I'm not stealing cars.
Yeah. I mean, that's just how my parents are just cool that I am at 32 financially independent of them. That is what they are most excited
He
about.
doesn't live at home. He's doing great.
But maybe if you are right, then that brings up a good point. We don't really hear a lot about female gamers that are mass murderers. So
No, you don't really hear about a lot of female mass murderers, female anything.
you know
criminal.
why? Because you guys are smarter than us and you don't get caught.
Sorry, but I mean,
Yeah.
you watch CSI, you learn a lot.
Yeah, you guys are really behind everything. I would say that, but if Donnell is indeed correct like that, I guess that really brings up a good point. I mean, but that's not even video games, and that's just marketing in the environment. And
yeah, it's kind of like saying like, which came, but the chicken or the egg? Is it something inside of us that we're born with, or is it marketing? Is it always pushing us to say, "Hey, kids, you got to be cool"? While girls are more of like, you got to be nurtured. Here's some babies toys, like
It's true.
take care
They
of
do
these
push
kids.
babies on you your whole life.
yeah.
That's the thing.
If you think about like games that are being sold, like Party Babies, right?
What?
They're being sold.
That's a
out
game that you
there.
and your friends play on the weekend too.
Party
No,
babies.
It's your version
It's
of
called
Dungeons and
Baby-
Dragons, and we don't want to talk about it here.
It's called Party Babies, and you know what? It sells.
Making it up.
Because you know
Babies
who's buying
spelled
them?
with a Z.
Mothers and women, and because they're like, hey, isn't it fun to have babies? It's like a party,
I
right?
guarantee you.
That's
that-
how
I
they're
guarantee
marketing
you
it.
know what's going on
That's
right
how
now.
that's how they market it.
I
Like,
guarantee
Raise your
you
hand
that-
if you think Donnell's making this up.
not
Right?
making it
Everybody
up.
there.
Google it. Google
Man
it.
from E who doesn't even pay attention to us ever is silently acknowledging that we're right about this right
Just
now.
look it up.
No,
Just look
but
it
I
up.
mean,
I'm sure that mothers are not playing any video games involving babies. I
Uh,
can tell
you'll be
you that.
surprised.
Hey, remember how
Casual
miserable I
gamers.
was when that thing came out of me? I'd like to celebrate that virtually
I spend
forever.
16 hours a day taking care of this thing. I want to get away from it, please.
But the studies did show that violent video games did bring out violent tendencies. So, I mean, if you are a violent person, you are going to be drawn to violent video games. If you're a not violent person, you probably will also enjoy violent video games. But a lot of studies have suggested that if you are already a violent person, these could encourage those behavioral traits.
And I
But
can agree
there's-
with that. I mean, I
Speaking
think
of studies, I mean, if you look at the entire history of the literature on this, it's inconclusive, and
It's
that's
not,
like all you
though.
can conclude. Well,
I mean, the thing with science is that you're constantly trying to prove things. I mean,
Yeah.
there's never going to be a definitive, nope, doesn't cause it. Mm-mm.
Ooh.
Like,
But that'd be
there-
great if a
there-
scientist in
exactly
a
what I'm
courtroom
saying.
did that
It's
exactly.
inconclusive. Some studies seem
then
to show
any,
some things.
Then any study is inconclusive because
What-
that's the way science works.
What was back then? Did Judas play games back then before he
Yeah,
did the
I'm
thing
pretty
that he
sure-
did,
I'm pretty
or
sure he didn't
because
play,
you've been
I mean,
around
if
for a
you-
long
if you go
time? Was
back
he
to
playing like tic tac toe in the
GTA
dirt
Nazareth?
with the other
GTA
disciples?
Well, listen,
Jerusalem?
back when I was a kid, we had the
GTA
Civil War to worry
Jerusalem.
about. Okay, we didn't have video games. We had real wars.
Yeah.
But if you look really honestly, like if you
World
look
War
back
One.
in the history of this kind of cultural hysteria over mass media for kids, it goes back to the 1950s at least, and the thing about comic books And the fact that back then the way they spoke about comic books was exactly the way people talk
Before
about
the
video
Comics
games now.
Code Authority came in,
Exactly.
right?
They said things like the first book was called Seduction of the Innocent, that caused all the comic
Good
code
name.
laws.
Good name.
Yeah, exactly. And they blamed comic books for some kid jumping out a window because they said he was trying to fly like Superman. They said
I
that
would blame acid.
Also guilty on. I mean, who hasn't put a cape on and jumped off his roof at some point, right?
They said that Batman
Not
and
me.
Robin were gay, and you could tell because Robin shaved his legs, which I think is awesome. And they had a problem with
He could have been a swimmer.
Right?
could have been a big
Have you ever
spider.
sweat in tights and tried to take those things off with leg hair? Sucks. It's hard. And then if you also have a ball gag in your mouth and you can't breathe, what? So you about the comics?
But the comics,
yeah.
and that caused enough of a hysteria that most people in the country thought that comic books caused juvenile delinquency, and they had to institute the comic book code. It killed the comic book industry. I mean, it was devastating to that growing artistic community.
It worked out though for comics.
Yeah, well, it worked out great for comics, sure, but it took a really long time, and there was a long time where you couldn't publish anything except for Casper the Friendly Ghost and that style of comic.
Right, Richie
So the
Rich.
same.
Which promotes ghosts.
Yeah, I know exactly.
But friendly ones.
Friendly ones.
It's fair.
Yeah.
You just have mean uncles.
Initially, it was Casper the ambivalent ghost, and people were like, it's got to be more
Yeah.
friendly.
So now, like
Change
any
it.
human being would say, well, that's just totally silly. Obviously, comic books are fine. Who cares? And it's going to be the same thing with video games.
Right.
In
Because of the
15
rate, I mean,
years?
the Comics Code Authority. Once the rating system was in place, then it was a lot harder to blame. Because then again, you could just dump it back on the parents, like that comic book is not
But
for your
video
kid, but you
game
bought it
ratings
for him.
have been in place for years.
That's
and
the interesting
blame
point. Is
hasn't
like
changed.
people still blame video games, and I do think, look, as much as I think parenting is the number one reason why these people are really messed up, I can agree that these are the types of things. It's not. It doesn't make people want to kill somebody, but it gets the if you got the killing juices inside you, it gets them flowing, right? Killing
does.
juices also
Killing
could mean
juices.
so many different things, but I mean, I could agree, I guess, to an extent that while I don't think that it makes people kill, it does certainly get the ball rolling in some capacity.
Yeah, but that's the thing is like that's
Along
where
with many other factors.
Yeah.
That's the
Yeah.
caveat, is that there are
I
many
think
other factors
ultimately
involved.
you can't really we'll never be able to decide the causation of violence
Sure.
because there's just too many factors, and there's just so many more factors that seem to be so much more important than video games, that even if video games play some small part, we would never be able to decide what it was, and it's probably just a tiny little part.
And everybody's different.
Yeah.
No, something's not going to have the same effect on somebody else.
Maybe
Simple.
I think the only way to really have conclusive evidence is if we find out one day that video games repress the body's ability to create and process its own quaaludes. Then we can see how that would be directly connected to. And now I got a quaalude reference in the show, and we still got 10 minutes left, so I'm feeling pretty good about my life.
Accomplished.
Quaalude done, right next to Steve the Worst. Quaalude done. But let's actually talk about. So I think we can all agree that there are many factors involved, but just blaming video games is wrong.
Silly.
That's just ridiculous. Blame parents.
Blame Steven Johnson.
But there
trying to say.
are people and governments, ours included, that recognize that maybe there's
Maybe there are
something
some
to this
benefits.
to an extent. And there's actually some games that other countries are using to actively train terrorists.
Yes.
We're using it in a much more subtle manner, but why don't we run down those, Nicole?
So Hezbollah has first of all, they have an entire task force in place to design video games for them. So I mean, you know, good on them.
Job.
So they've created
Good
a
on
game.
Hezbollah.
yeah.
I mean,
It should be stated that we don't condone the actions of Hezbollah in any way,
I'm
shape, or
just
form.
impressed that there's a video game division.
Yeah.
Like that's organized.
Yeah.
That is. You're very right. And designing games in caves, too, must be a
It's
pain in the
tough.
ass, too.
I mean,
By
Ethernet.
candlelight. I mean, how is
Really
it?
long Ethernet cable.
Where do I
Writing
plug this
code,
in?
scratching code on the wall with a stick. It's difficult. Anyway,
Point is, they've created a game called Special Force, and it's basically geographically accurate. The weather's accurate. The weapons are accurate. Everything is completely as it should be, to train people to kill Israelis, basically. And it's an awful thing, but I mean, it's completely accurate, and they're using it to train their soldiers, their terrorists. I guess they're soldiers to them, to kill the Israelis, and it's a video game.
yeah.
And it's I don't know, I guess it's effective in training. And so there's kind of the question there of if video games are violent, and are they training terrorists to be killers?
Well, I think that, you know,
Flip side.
but is it like, are they training people to be violent? Or are they training people to use that violence to hurt people? You know what I mean?
Probably both. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people who sign up for these types of things aren't violent in nature. But I mean,
Well, something tells me like the Hezbollah people, they probably don't have much
Sure,
of a
but who knows
choice. You
how
know,
many-
it's like
Yeah,
you're in
exactly.
it or because somebody decides that you're in it. However, the U.S. government, on the other hand, is also doing something not similar to this in regards to training them to
Yeah.
kill specific types of people. But we've seen America's Army was a recruiting
Yeah.
tool that we've
Mm-hmm.
seen over a number of years. But recently, the U.S. government paired up with Epic Games to create something as well.
Epic Games partnered with Virtual Heroes to launch the Unreal Government Network.
Mm-hmm.
So, which is good on them for putting Unreal in there. It's just good
Yeah.
marketing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah.
but what a creepy
Jeez.
name. The Unreal Government
Right?
Network. I mean,
No, it's real though. It's a super government network, guys.
Right.
So there's games to train medics, there's games to train FBI agents, there's games to train soldiers, and it's basically built on the Unreal Engine 3. Games intended to train people to do their job, which
Mm-hmm.
involves killing people in a lot of cases.
Now, I have personally not been exposed to this particular game, but does the end result? Do you actually kill people in these games, or is it just
It's not.
this is
they
what a
haven't
squad
said.
formation should be? This is how we should, this is how this should interact on the battlefield.
I'm sure you do. I mean,
probably-
I don't know, but I would imagine that
For
you
the
would kill
medic
people.
one, I'm sure you're not killing people, but I'm sure you're in very violent situations. But if these organizations are saying yes, video games can be used to train, then are they having the same effect on kids? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it could easily be argued.
Right. And then we obviously, I think all of us can disagree on the Hezbollah thing, right? I mean, that's a terrible thing that
Oh,
they're
it's
doing there.
awful.
Yeah.
But if we are, in fact, doing kind of the same thing, then does that make us as guilty as them?
Well, I'm trying to
At least we're less open about it.
find out more because the whole training through video games, it's quite different than pulling a trigger on like the right trigger to shoot rather than actually shooting a rifle
Sure.
that has a tremendous kickback and the smell and how loud it is. Like it's more frightening that way rather than like, oh, it's a little bit too loud, let me turn it down on the volume, And especially me, I played tons of dating simulators, right?
You do. Yeah,
to train.
yeah.
And
Also,
I'm horrible at
eHarmony and
dates and I can't even
Match.com,
get
not
one.
simulators.
What?
Real things. eHarmony and Match.com, not a simulator.
No, there's some Japanese
those are
games
real
that
people.
we're actually
Yeah,
not supposed to
Japanese
talk
games.
about.
Arctone
Oh, with the octopi and the that's
Yeah, she was
we-
like half robot,
yeah.
half
We decided
girl.
not to talk about that on the show. Remember?
Okay, I'm
all
sorry.
three halves.
Cool.
All in all, I still need a date. So.
But you playing these simulators, and
But-
please tell me how this is going to tie into.
But what I'm saying is that I think now if they're training them like they give you a kind of like a realistic gun but doesn't fire, it's a blank rounds, right? And they put you in this big projector screen and you have to move around and like cover and like it's a more virtual kind of reality kind of setup. Then I can understand that because that's more active. That's more of like you're in the field, you got to make quick decisions because that can train you. It's to make quick decisions, reflexes, and be able to identify things that may be bad.
I think the reflexing is actually what is the interest of the government in these kinds of simulations.
It's getting your
because
brain
True.
prepared.
When they did studies after World War II of actual battlefield simulation or battlefield situations, they found that a large percentage of soldiers didn't pull the trigger because it's real hard to pull the trigger when you have somebody in the sights of your gun. So they tried to counteract this problem by creating training that made it reflexive and something you don't think about, which I don't want to be all anti-government, but it's kind of like, man, if I got tricked into shooting somebody and had to deal with it for the rest of my life, I'd be kind of messed up in the head. And I
you have to
it's a
assume
really
some
moral
friendly
gray
fire
area.
is probably factored in there as well. So you not only have to live
You
with
can just
killing
turn that
somebody,
off.
but you
Oh,
might
no,
have
real
also
life.
killed. Yeah, not how it happens apparently in the real world. But you're right. I mean, it's like anytime you see movement, you shoot, and then there's the dude who yesterday was in the kitchen peeling potatoes. They still do that, right?
One day away from retirement.
Yeah, one day away from retirement.
They always are.
Poor Danny Glover. He almost made it, but he didn't.
So yeah, that whole thing kind of creeps me out. I mean, because like
Do you still do that, or is that like a World War II thing?
Well, I
they
feel like
still do
it's
that. I mean,
more-
that's the point or the philosophy behind a lot of their training is they want people to react immediately to things and not think about it. Because if you think about it, most people are probably not going to kill somebody. I mean, they're just probably not going to do it because you could, like, if I'm aiming at a player, I could just go like this, and then all of a sudden,
You dual
I
wielding?
didn't shoot.
Is that what you're saying?
I was dual wielding.
Well, that's what I always fire off a warning shot. You know what I mean?
Do you?
I'm gonna
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm like the captain of in Firefly, dude. You know what I mean? I won't kill you if I
I
don't
just
have
shoot
to.
first and ask questions later.
That's pretty
That's
cool.
what I do. Huh?
You're a dangerous man, Steve.
Right.
You're a
loose
dangerous
cannon.
man. That's why you've been red flagged just now. I want to move into some of the viewer questions because we only have a couple more minutes. Ender Wiggin thank you as always for
Ender
writing
Wiggin
into
rules,
us.
man.
I know.
And again,
Superstar.
we get a
Best.
lot of questions. Ender, thank you for being so succinct and understandable in your questioning. We appreciate it. How do you think the proliferation of gaming to a much wider casual audience will impact future discussion on banning or censoring violent games? With more people playing games than ever before, will attempts to control the medium through legislation face more backlash and opposition? Nicole, you kind of brought this point up at the beginning of the episode. Do you think that that will be the case?
I think it's going to be an issue. I think it's going to continue to be an issue, especially in an election year. People are just going to bring it up. There was I forget the politician, but he was, I think, in San Diego trying to put a tax on violent video games, have extra health labels put on video games. People are just going above and beyond to kind of to diss, I guess, video games and to make them seem like the bad guy. And it's just because I think it's because people are playing them more than ever. So more parents than ever are aware of it, more voters than ever are aware of it. And I think it's going to continue to be an issue the more people who play it. Will there be a backlash? Yes. Like, I think that once someone plays a video game, they know that these precautions aren't necessary. But I think it's going to be discussed and put in front of courts for a long time.
Now, do you think that I feel like I absolutely agree with you 100%, but I feel like politicians feel like this needs to be a part of like one of their talking points in their platform, but they don't really care if it actually
Right.
pushes through or not. It's just
I
like,
agree.
by the way, video games are bad. I'm talking about it. Don't forget that I'm talking about it. But we haven't actually seen
Education.
anybody
Say
aggressively
things.
pursue
Well, the
changing
Supreme
that. I
Court-
mean, there a
Yeah,
couple.
the Supreme Court ruled that video games are a valid form of
Yeah, I went
expression, and
to-
that kind of shoots down a lot of the legislation that you can propose
But
realistically
not the
want.
about
health
video
warnings.
games. Yeah, and they're trying to get around the Supreme Court's ruling, but it's sort of ridiculous. I mean, and I agree with you that it is from both sides of the political aisle, left and right, just a talking point, just to like.
I mean, the level of
let's get people
expectation has to be
agree with
pretty
me. Yeah,
low,
exactly.
right? Like, I assume most of these people don't actually want to affect change. They just want people to
What a
think that
non-issue,
they're talking about.
too. Like,
I know,
there's
right?
so much
Stupid.
wrong with this country, and like,
Let's worry about pretend
education
problems in
and-
fake worlds.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think they're definitely going to use that, but in the future, I feel like it's not going to be too much of a big issue. I think we're going to start using video games as a more educational tool. So it's going to be. I mean, when I was
like
growing
Assassin's
up,
Creed 3,
the rate. What?
educational.
Yeah,
Yeah.
educational, revolutionary war
Yeah.
history.
It's going to be no. I'm really like honest. This
I
is
agree.
going to be the future. I already went to the psychic and they predicted it just
wow,
like
okay.
I'm saying
Who
it.
knows?
So you're welcome. No,
You're a
but
multi-layered individual, Donnell. The things you do in your free time with your weird baby fantasy game that you play with your buddies.
Dating
Now you're a
Sims.
psychic.
Can we just do
dating
a
sim.
feedback about the no, or just talk to him
It's
about his
just
It's
life?
called
me all
Donnell's
the time.
Thursday nights, and it's just all about this
Hello.
creepy stuff.
hello, welcome.
All these creepy antics he gets into.
It's not going to, and especially since a new generation is going to take place in the politics, because right now, like people who are owning the media, or overruling what they're going to say are people who don't know about video games. But soon that generation will be gone and a new generation will come in. So it'll be a new thing that they're going to talk about. Video games are going to be the old thing that no one really cares about. But yeah, they're probably going to bring up education. It's all about that.
Like comic
but
books.
I think video games, and like it's going to be an era where no one talks about it really, and you're going to see that more and more often. Because when I grew up, the way I learned typing was Mario typing.
Peter Rabbit.
That's how I learned how to type.
Mavis
Mavis
Beacon.
Beacon.
Yeah.
And I remember one level that says 4 years ago, Abraham Lincoln, and I'm just typing. I'm like, this is great. I got to get to the end, rather than
What
just.
happened to Abraham Lincoln?
You don't want to know what happened to Abraham
He
Lincoln
became a
at the
vampire
end.
hunter.
Oh
Spoiler
my
alert,
God.
vampire hunter. You're right. The
Vampire-
generations are very
Yeah.
different.
Wow, this is great. What happens to Abraham? Oh no!
Turn around.
Backspace. I think, Steve, I totally agree with you, man. I think 15 years from now, people are going to be talking about video games much the same way they talk about comic books. The unfortunate thing is that you will not be alive to see that.
Exactly.
Your point.
'Cause I'll long be
Yeah,
in the grave.
which will be, but your kid, as
Dexter, he's gonna
in
have-
prison, will
Wow.
have the ability, I think, to.
I wonder what the next thing people are going to freak out about is going to be, though. Like, it's
Yeah.
going to be awesome. Like, what are you
Holograms.
guys get? Like, there's going to be something that you guys are going to freak out
Holograms.
about.
It's true. Holograms. would be the
Holograms
next
are
thing.
destroying our kids. The
Tupac,
holodeck is
he's
too
back.
violent.
I hope that it's something just completely ludicrous, like the length of shoelaces. Like it has to be something very physical and very tangible, and something that makes no sense at all.
Velcro, maybe.
Yeah, like are we all
Making
going to
our
move
kids
into the
lazy?
future, the Back to the Future
Velcro
shoes?
shoelaces are destroying our child's minds.
Yes. But realistically, what do you think the next thing will be? We'll close out with that. If you had to just speculate, what do you think the next thing will be that we as a whole blame everything on?
The internet. I think it's going to be a more. I feel like the more the government puts sanctions on the internet, the more people are going to make an open internet, even if it's an internet alternative. I don't know if there's a satellite in the sky making a new internet for us. I think that people are. I'd eventually like to see us plugged into it, and I think it's the hive
Matrix.
mind that they're going to just like.
All right.
Yeah.
Because then they're going to have to confront the actual dark nature of humanity through technology
Yep.
in a hive mind where we're all checked in with USB ports that go right into our brain.
We'll be able to learn
Yeah.
kung fu like that, fly
Yeah.
helicopters. It's going to be awesome.
It's going to be the
What do you think,
greatest.
man? What do you think, Steve?
I think honestly something along the lines of a complete alternative reality that we are actually able to be immersed in. That people will be like, oh my God, people are using this to have sex with famous people and also murder everyone. Because that's what people would use it for if you could do that.
Started doing The
So-
Sims. This
Yeah,
is basically
exactly.
The Sims.
Yeah.
So that's what I think could be the next thing in some alternative dystopia.
All right.
Yeah. My future
Oh,
contains
Oh no.
holographic
One hand slowly slides below the table.
holographic girlfriends that every guy has stops the population from growing because no one wants to actually do it because it's sick and it has so many diseases and you got to have a license
This is
to
the
do
plot
it.
for a sci-fi movie.
Yeah.
But then
Scarily well thought
only
out, though.
one man can repopulate the world.
Donnell
And that
Tucker.
means Donnell Tucker.
It's D the last man.
That's the
weird.
future that's going to
I want to
happen.
take a shower now. This is really bad.
You're the reason we won't have sex with each other. Creepy stories like that. That's eerie, man, but it could actually be true.
Maybe a hologram.
Which I
of
almost
robots.
want to see to it. I just want, I want the future
I
humanity
wanna
to
see
rest
it
on your
too.
shoulders and your crotch. I'm going to take a different tack. I'm going to say that the next generation is going to blame everything on the generation before them.
Ooh,
That's original.
I think that's, but
Teenagers.
I truly think though it's going to carry over into their adult lives where they're going to go, you know what? The previous government F things up to the point where it's just
That's pretty
irreversible.
possible.
So we just give up. Like we just don't care at all about anything because of these people. And
That's
I think that's what
interesting.
it'll be. That's what I want because
I
I
hope
want
I
to be
get my
blameless for
Social
everything that I do.
Security.
But I mean, I feel like the politics are moving in that direction anyway. That's a much different conversation. But it's really less about who they're running against and more about how many problems they had before they came into office.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But that's a different story for a different time. Well, thank you guys so much for your. I thought this was a good
Yeah,
conversation.
we learned a lot about each other.
Yeah.
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 Learned about games.
Probably didn't want to learn
Yeah.
about things
Yeah, we
about
learned
me.
a lot about
but-
Donnell.
Yeah, we always do though, and it's never gratifying or clean. But we keep inviting him back,
We do.
which
I
says a
don't
lot
know.
about
I
us.
always
It
feel like
does.
I'm going to get banned from this
Yeah,
show.
You
it'll
never
never
do.
happen, man. We love you too much, and I'm not afraid to admit that. Well, thank you guys as usual for being here, and for you guys for watching, and Ender Wiggin for always writing in those questions. We really do appreciate it. New episodes, feedback go up every week on Wednesdays. Why did I almost forget that? New episodes every week on
Preludes.
Wednesdays. G42.com/feedback.
Wow.